All right, welcome. This video is predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. The date that this email here was composed on July 11th proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. As we can see here also, right, that this date confirms this. And also, the date that this video was posted proves this prediction is being made ahead of time. That said, the knowledge that Paul Simon will die on August 1st has been known since November of 2024. I have been busy with other things in the meantime, which has prevented me from documenting this earlier than now. But this isn't the first video. But anyway, we are documenting this prediction ahead of time. And when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove the analysis. Well, and vice versa. What I mean is that the reasoning for how this is known ahead of time, which I'll explain in a minute in this video, proves that the prediction is being made ahead of time. Because there will be the extreme fanatic skeptic, the extremist skeptic that will say, well, this guy must have produced a video for every date in the calendar year. Hopefully, eventually he would get it right and nail the day that Paul Simon would die. That's completely absurd. Absurd isn't the right word. That's crazy. It would be a crazy person that would do such a thing, and the person that believes that someone would do that is themselves crazy. And also, the reasoning that I'll be explaining is profound. No human being could concoct in their own imagination the reasoning that I explain in these videos, including this video. So, this email is titled The Death of David Gergen, but it should be really another title that's more appropriate and interesting, which I would say be the Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter debate. The famous debate which arguably gave Ronald Reagan the election. At least this is how historians talk about this key debate. The debate and the key moment in the debate comes from David Gergen, the political advisor for Ronald Reagan. David Gergen inspired this pivotal moment when Ronald Reagan on the stage with Carter during the debate asked Jimmy Carter, asked the audience, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Paul Simon is tied to this, and Jimmy Carter, who Ronald Reagan was debating, who was president at the time, because Paul Simon performed at the pre-inaugural ball for Jimmy Carter. In other words, Paul Simon is symbolism for the beginning of Jimmy Carter and his presidency, which was in 1977. In God's signs, Jimmy Carter began a parallel with the prophecy in the book of Revelation regarding 7 kings. Incidentally, President Trump is the 7th in that parallel. And on that note, when Trump was inaugurated, he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. Well, Jimmy Carter was inaugurated in 77. And Paul Simon, in God's signs here, is associated or symbolic of the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation. Simon is predicted to die on the date 8/1, August 1st, because it'll point to Revelation 8:1, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's big first hit that went to number one and made him a big time star was Sound of Silence, which incidentally Paul Simon has said in interviews that he didn't really write. It just flowed through him. He was sort of a conduit of the song, if you will, is how he would put it. Well, Jimmy Carter's presidency is synonymous with the Iranian hostage crisis, which is also known as the 444-day hostage crisis, which ended on the day that Carter left office. So Carter's final 444 days in office coincided with the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. And when Carter left office, Reagan took office. Reagan was the 40th president. And he took office at the end of the 444-day Iran, or rather, 444-day hostage crisis. The reason for this is that the number 4 God is using to symbolize a door. The 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. The Hebrew letters are also symbols for things. The 4th letter is a symbol for a door, which is incidentally where we get the name door from. Because Dalat, the name of the letter in the Hebrew alphabet, gets us to Delta, which is also the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet. And that's how we get door. Long story short, that's the etymological root of the word door. And so 4 symbolizes this, as does Paul Simon. Because Paul Simon's biggest hit was Bridge Over Troubled Water, and in God's signs, a bridge is the same symbolism as a door. It's pointing to the prophecy in the book of Revelation when the bottomless pit will be opened with a key, and from this bottomless pit, demons will rise and invade the earthly realm. Doors are opened with keys. That's why a key is mentioned in this prophecy. Keys, musical keys, are essential in music composition, and Paul Simon is not only known for being a singer, but also a music composer. And for that matter, he wrote himself the songs Sound of Silence and Bridge Over Troubled Water. I forgot to mention that Carter's inauguration in 77 also ties to Paul Simon because, as I mentioned, Paul Simon, and the reason why he will die on August 1st, is the Sound of Silence song. And that is followed by, in the rest of the chapter, the 7 trumpets of God's judgment. Paul Simon's most recent album is titled 7 Psalms, which incidentally he claims to have been inspired to make and title it 7 Psalms through instructions given to him in a prophetic dream. Paul Simon is also known for his big hit Late in the Evening, which heavily uses trumpets. Okay, and there are 7 trumpets, and he performed in 77 at the inaugural ball. He performed the songs American Tune. He performed American Tune. All right, now, so we have the background there. I've explained some background to the connections between Carter and Paul Simon, and thereby Ronald Reagan, the 40th president. David Gergen, okay, this gets us to this sign here, which was the death of David Gergen, a senior advisor for 4 presidents. So this David Gergen advisor was the advisor for 4 presidents. That's astounding. And so that's one of the things, of course, this man is most known for. 4 presidents. Again, this is about the number 4, as I'm explaining. Now, David Gergen's most famous moment, if you will, was through Ronald Reagan on the stage when he asked the question that David Gergen told him to ask, which is that, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? So the senior advisor to 4 presidents inspired Reagan's, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? This hints at another president, the 44th president, who is the Antichrist. God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together. He pairs these numbers together in order to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. And I know that these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. The 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. All right, so we have the senior advisor to 4 presidents having Reagan ask the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The 44th president is why 23 and 44 are paired together. Gergen, who hints at 44, as I just explained, died at the age of 83. And 83 is the 23rd prime number. That's a pairing of 23 and 44. And his death is 400 plus 400 plus 400 hours before the date August 30th, which is what 83 hints at. And God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And so David Gergen, who is associated with the number 4, as I've now explained, died 400 plus 400 plus 400 hours before the date 830, which is why he died at the age of 83. And it is predicted on 830 that a dirty bomb will be detonated in Manhattan. Carter was defeated by Reagan, and the moment that symbolizes this is when Reagan asked the Gergen-inspired question. Paul Simon performed American Tune at Carter's inaugural ball in 77. Carter began a parallel with the 7 Kings prophecy. And again, Paul Simon's album, 7 Psalms, and he'll die on August 1st because of the Revelation prophecy that is with the sound of silence that is followed by 7 trumpets. Now, 7 is the 4th prime number. Simon is predicted to die, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, especially the number 7. Paul Simon is predicted to die 7 plus 7 plus 7 days, which is the 4th prime plus 4th prime plus 4th prime number of days, after the death of Gergen, who is synonymous with or symbolic of the number 4. Right? Senior advisor to 4 presidents, inspiring the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? His death is the 4th prime plus 4th prime plus 4th prime number before the predicted death of Simon, who is symbolic of door, because of the bridge over troubled water, bridge being the same symbolism as a door. And again, door is the 4th letter of the alphabet, Hebrew alphabet. So